When we ask the question, who is right, Iran or Israel, we must begin with honesty, not emotion. And honesty demands that we do not allow slogans, flags, or anger to decide the truth for us. We must begin from a higher principle, and that principle is justice. Because if we abandon justice in times of war, then we have already lost our humanity before the first missile even lands. The first question any fair-minded person must ask is simple. Who escalated the conflict, and was that escalation justified? In international law, this matters deeply. It is not enough for a nation to say, "We feel threatened," or "We believe danger may come one day." The use of force is not meant to be based on fear alone, suspicion alone, or political convenience alone. If military action is taken first, then the burden of proof falls heavily on the one who acts first. They must show the world that what they did was necessary, lawful, and unavoidable. This is where the issue becomes morally serious. Because once one strike is launched, the entire region can be set on fire. One attack leads to retaliation. Retaliation leads to counter-retaliation, and soon people stop asking who started it and begin simply counting the dead. That is why the opening act matters. It is not a small detail. It is the doorway through which chaos enters. Now some will say, but every side claims it had a reason. And yes, that is true. Every government has its narrative. Every military has its justification. Every leader has words prepared for the cameras. But justice is not measured by who speaks louder. Justice is measured by principle. If a nation chooses force before exhausting peace, if it chooses bombs before diplomacy, if it chooses escalation before restraint, then it weakens its moral claim, no matter how powerful it may be. And let us be clear, this is not about defending one government or glorifying another. This is not blind loyalty to Iran, nor is it blind hatred of Israel. This is about a standard that must apply to all nations equally. If we condemn aggression when our enemies commit it, then we must also condemn aggression when our allies commit it. Otherwise, we are not standing for justice, we are standing for hypocrisy. A Muslim, a person of conscience, a human being with moral clarity, must never allow tribalism to replace truth. We do not ask which side is mine, we ask which action was just. And when the first act of force cannot stand firmly on the ground of law, necessity, and moral restraint, then the claim of being right becomes deeply shaken. The side that chooses escalation first must answer not only to politics, but to justice itself. After asking who escalated the conflict first, the next question becomes even more complicated because now both sides begin to speak the language of self-defense. And this is where many people become confused. They hear one side say, "We are protecting our people," and then they hear the other side say the very same thing. One side says it is acting to prevent future destruction, and the other says it is responding to present aggression. Both claim fear, both claim necessity, both claim survival, and to the average listener, it begins to sound as though both cannot be wrong. But in reality, both can misuse the same language, and that is why we must be very careful. Self-defense is one of the most powerful words in international politics. The moment a state says, "We are defending ourselves," many people stop asking deeper questions. But true self-defense is not simply a slogan. It is not a blank check. It is not a shield behind which any missile can be launched and any destruction can be justified. In both law and morality, self-defense has conditions. It must be necessary, it must be proportionate, and it must be limited to what is truly required to remove the threat. If these limits are ignored, then the phrase self-defense becomes nothing more than a respectable name for revenge. This is why we must think carefully. If Israel says it is acting to stop a threat, then the world has the right to ask, Was the threat immediate, proven, and unavoidable? Were all other paths exhausted? Was force the last resort or the first instinct? And if Iran says it is retaliating in self-defense after being struck, then the same questions apply. Is the response measured, or is it expanding the war? Is it targeting military realities or deepening regional chaos? Because once retaliation becomes excessive, once it spreads fear among civilians and fuels a wider fire, then even a response that began with a legal claim can lose its moral standing. And this is the tragedy of war. Each side begins to believe its own pain gives it unlimited permission. Each side points to its wounds as proof that anything it does next is justified. But pain does not automatically create righteousness. Suffering does not automatically sanctify every response. Being attacked does not mean one is free from moral boundaries. In fact, the true test of moral character is not how we behave when we are safe, but how we behave when we are hurt. This is a lesson we must never forget. Justice is not tested in comfort, justice is tested in anger. Anyone can speak of principles when calm. The real question is whether those principles remain when blood is hot, when grief is fresh, and when revenge feels easy. If self-defense becomes an excuse for endless escalation, then it no longer protects life. It becomes part of the machinery that destroys it. Self-defense is only just when it protects life without becoming another name for vengeance. But after all the arguments about law, after all the claims of self-defense, after all the speeches from governments and the statements from generals, we eventually arrive at the most painful reality of all, and that is the human cost. Because there comes a point in every conflict when debates about strategy and politics begin to sound hollow. There comes a point when maps, borders, and military language can no longer hide the truth, and the truth is this: it is not the powerful who suffer most in war. It is the ordinary people. It is the mother who cannot sleep because she does not know if her child will wake up. It is the father who leaves home not knowing if there will still be a home to return to. It is the child who learns the sound of missiles before learning the meaning of peace. This is where the entire discussion changes, because when we ask, who is right, we often imagine governments, armies, and ideologies. But the real victims are rarely the ones making the decisions. The men who declare war are often far from the rubble. The leaders who speak of strength are often far from the funerals. The strategists who discuss retaliation are often far from the hospitals. And yet, it is the innocent who bury their loved ones, the innocent who flee in terror, the innocent who carry trauma long after the cameras leave. We must never allow ourselves to become so politically obsessed that we lose our ability to feel. This is one of the greatest dangers of modern conflict. When war is repeated in headlines every day, hearts can become numb. People begin to count casualties as statistics instead of souls. 10 dead, 50 wounded, hundreds displaced, and the numbers move across the screen so quickly that we forget every number had a name, a face, a family, a future. This is a spiritual disease when we stop grieving for the innocent because they belong to the other side. We have already surrendered our moral compass. And this is why the question of civilian suffering is not a side issue. It is the central issue. If bombs fall on neighborhoods, if children are pulled from debris, if fear becomes the daily atmosphere of a people, then no speech about national pride can erase that stain. No argument about deterrence can wash away the tears of a parent. No political justification can restore a life once it has been taken. The true measure of a conflict is not how forcefully a nation speaks, but how many innocent lives are shattered while it speaks. If our hearts remain awake, then this is the moment we realize something profound. Even when one side may have a legal argument, and another may have a strategic argument. The suffering of civilians exposes the bankruptcy of endless escalation. Because once the innocent become the cost of proving a point, then the point itself has become morally corrupted. When innocent lives become the price of victory, then victory itself becomes a form of defeat. And after everything we have said, after examining who escalated first, after questioning the limits of self-defense, after confronting the unbearable suffering of innocent people, we are finally brought to the most difficult truth of all. And that truth is that war has a way of making everyone feel justified while making the entire region more broken. This is why the real answer to the question, who is right, Iran or Israel, cannot simply be found in military arguments, patriotic speeches, or emotional slogans. Because if the result is more death, more fear, more hatred, and more generations raised on trauma, then even the side that wins on the battlefield may lose in the court of humanity. This is the illusion of power in our age. Nations believe that if they strike harder, they will be safer. Leaders believe that if they respond with greater force, they will restore deterrence. Populations are told that strength means refusing restraint. But history teaches us again and again that unrestrained force rarely ends conflict. It deepens memory, multiplies enemies, and plants the seeds of the next war. One missile may silence a threat for a day, but it may also create 10 more for the future. One operation may satisfy anger in the moment, but it may leave wounds that shape decades. This is not wisdom. This is the cycle of destruction disguised as strategy. So what, then, is the truly right position? The truly right position is not cowardice, and it is not surrender to injustice. Let us be clear. Calling for peace does not mean ignoring oppression. Calling for restraint does not mean pretending there are no threats. Calling for de-escalation does not mean abandoning accountability. Rather, it means understanding that justice without wisdom can become rage, and strength without mercy can become cruelty. The truly right side is the side that still remembers moral limits, even when it has the power to ignore them. This is what the world desperately needs, not more speeches about domination, but leaders with the courage to stop the fire before it consumes everyone. Because war does not remain neatly contained between two flags. It spills across borders. It draws in proxies, militias, allies, and enemies. It turns local tension into regional disaster. And when a region is already wounded, every new strike is not just an event. It is an invitation to a wider catastrophe. That is why peace is not naive. Peace is not weakness. In moments like these, peace is the hardest discipline of all. And for people of conscience, for people who still believe in justice, we must reject the false choice that says we must celebrate one side's violence in order to oppose the others. We can condemn aggression, demand accountability, defend the oppressed, and still insist that endless escalation is not salvation. In the end, the truly right side is not the one with the louder weapons, but the one with the courage to step back from the edge. The truly right side is the one that has the power to continue the war, but the wisdom to end it.